Good afternoon. I'm Zahim Al-Bakri from Badan Warisan Malaysia, and welcome listeners out there to our webinar talk this afternoon. We've got a very interesting topic. It's about Fraser's Hill, which came to the news last year when a particular bungalow, the Maybank bungalow, was suddenly demolished, heritage bungalow. Today we have our speakers today are two residents of Fraser's Hill, Dr. Zubaida Ibrahim Bell. Dr. Zubaida was a former deputy dean and associate professor in the Faculty of Languages and Linguistics at University Malaya. She's also co-founder and chair of the Fraser's Hill Community Library Association. She's also a visiting lecturer at the University of North Sumatra, Indonesia, and an associate faculty member of Singapore University of Social Science in the field of translation and applied linguistics. Other speaker this afternoon is Professor Roger Bell. Professor Roger Bell is an honorary fellow of the Institute of Linguistics, London, scholar in translation, linguistics, and communication. He's the author of several books. The most well-known is Translation and Translating, Theory and Practice, which has been translated into Romanian, Korean, Chinese, and Malay, and is used as a reference in universities worldwide. He has more than 40 years of experience in language education as a teacher, researcher, and administrator, holding teaching posts at Lancaster University, University of Westminster, University of Karachi, University of Brasilia, the International Islamic University, and is a visiting member of the Faculty of Linguistics at Universitas Sumatera Utara in Medan, Indonesia. He currently lives, I believe, in Fraser's Hill with his wife, Zubaida Ibrahim. Let's bring them on. Hello, Professor and Dr. Zubaida.
Hello, hi.
Good afternoon. How are you today?
All right for my age.
Well, welcome to our webinar, and I'm very much looking forward to your talk that both of you are going to conduct this afternoon. You're calling it a test case for heritage conservation. I have long believed that Fraser's Hill should be gazetted and preserved for its natural heritage as well as its built heritage. But I'm very, very keen to hear your arguments for doing so. Shall we begin?
Okay, yes.
Yeah,
All right. Thank you, Dr. Zahim, for the introduction. Salam and good afternoon to everyone watching this presentation this afternoon. First of all, I would like to give very quickly an outline of what we will cover in this talk. And after the presentation, since I'm sure the topic is of interest to many parties, I think a good discussion is more important. So in the Q&A, we'll have questions and discussions. But I must say that we as speakers, we are not experts in conservation and stuff like that. But we are very highly interested stakeholders on the hill, since we live there for 8 or 9 years now. So what we're going to cover is what is Fraser's Hill. I mean, Roger will talk first. What is Fraser's Hill? Its location, history, its climate, geology, and why protect it, and how can it be protected? And then I will come on again to talk a little bit about what is the built environment in Fraser's Hill, heritage buildings in Fraser's Hill, and to point out that there are research reports, official guidelines, acts that we can refer for guidance, and after that, the conclusion. So Roger will start, and I will hand it over to him.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Hello. There's just a little site map of Fraser's Hill, the master map, showing the various activities and the trails and so forth. I don't want to say anything about that. I'll go on to actually making some comments. Here we are about the test case. I don't want to say a lot about the hill itself because, quite frankly, the information about the hill goes back 100 years. There's been all kinds of work done on the hill, and it is enormously well known, both locally and internationally. So I'll pick up one or two things as we go along. The crucial thing, I think, is to try and say something about the test case. I want to define the three terms. And I will read this to you, although I won't read most of the other things. One, because it's not easy for me. I don't recommend getting old. And the other is that you can actually read it quicker than I can read it out. But very quickly, the test case is a legal case that becomes an example for deciding other similar cases. What we're saying is that we're not going to make suggestions about what should be done in particular, because there's a lot of information about that too. But I just would say that the Fraser's Hill is so amazing and so diverse that if we can get this accepted as being worthy of proper treatment, then other places will follow suit. And that's how test cases work. Just on heritage, heritage is property that is or may be inherited. We're talking about an inheritance. There's some synonyms there. Synonyms: inheritance, patrimony, legacy, bequest, endowment, and so on. But in reality, of course, we don't inherit the earth, except in a metaphorical sense. We are not apart from the earth and inherit it. We are part of the earth. We are, as has been said, we are relatively large, omnivorous, extremely technologically advanced monkeys. We belong to the earth. Conservation, the usual definition of that is that it's the prevention of the wasteful use of a resource. Well, it goes a lot further than that, but that will do to begin with. So if I can just move on. So what is it? Very quickly, it's protected forest, and it's about 100 kilometers north of KL, and it's on the Titiwangsa Range, really as the dividing line between Pahang and Selangor. Titiwangsa Range is interesting because it's Malaysia's longest mountain range, and it really splits the peninsula in half, and it goes right up into Thailand. It's 480 kilometers from north to south, and all linked together. Any animal that felt so inclined could walk from Gombak into Thailand, or perhaps fly would be easier if you were a bird. On we go. So, forest preserve complex, strength. It's ancient. It is really quite incredibly ancient. We're talking about the mountains having been produced somewhere like 300 million years ago, at the time when the Pangaea supercontinent was breaking up, and two bits crashed into each other, producing the mountains. That's a very untechnical way of saying it. It is very ancient, and it is a self-regulating ecological system in the sense that it will look after itself. If you have, let us say, a landslide, it doesn't matter to the animals, they'll just walk round. It matters to us, but we're a particular sort of animal. So, geological instability, that's a real threat. The whole thing is sand and aggregate, and it is very, very, well, it's sliding down into the ocean on both sides, but it will take millions of years. The second big threat, of course, is intrusive species, things like the wild boar, whose habitats have been destroyed and they've come up into the hills. feral cats and dogs, and probably the most dangerous of these intrusive species are human beings. Not the orang asli, who are hunter-gatherers, and they do no harm, but we do. And it, in fact, means constant maintenance for human beings. It will look after itself, but if we mess about with it, we will have to do something. This is all well documented. There are dozens of case studies and heaven knows what else. I certainly am not going to try to summarize them. We have things that go back, World Wildlife Fund research, excellent research, going back to 1995. The most recent things, a symposium in December on the development and so on. This has been going on for so long, 25 years. So, not going to yarn about that. Okay, so what is it? It's an ecosystem, forest ecosystem. There you are. Cultural and spiritual values, air quality, carbon sequestration, it says in storage, wild species habitat, water supply. This is all the things that it does. It's a very complex system. Okay. So natural environment, homeostatic, I've already said that. The built environment is what I think we should concentrate on, because that is unique in a way that the natural environment isn't unique. There are lots of unique natural environments, but our built environment is quite extraordinary. It's only 1.5% of the total area, and there was tin mining in the 1890s. And its development as a hill resort is the 20s and 30s. First permanent building, 1919, the police station, of course. Well-preserved mock Tudor style, pre-World War II hill station, bungalows and official buildings. A lot of detail from Zubaida about that later. Attractions, again, very quickly, ecotourism, bird watching, it's so well known for bird watching. There's much more. Cultural tourism, physical attractions, physical activities, nature trails, walking, boating, horse riding. Again, the details of that will come in a moment. Let's get on to heritage. World heritage. This is a UNESCO thing. World heritage, they say, is a place that is listed as being of special cultural or physical significance, and to be listed, an area must satisfy at least one of the 10 criteria. That's important. There are 10 criteria, and you must satisfy at least one. Cultural and natural conservation, that goes back to 1965, in order to preserve the world's superb natural and scenic areas, historic sites for the present and the future of the entire world citizenry, as they say. All right. Here we've got the three that actually satisfy the criteria. Cultural tradition, okay, unique, bears a unique or at least exceptional testimony to a cultural tradition or a civilization which is living or which has disappeared. Well, it has disappeared. We're talking about colonial Malaysia, and that is long gone. Natural phenomena or beauty, superlative natural phenomena or areas of exceptional national beauty and aesthetic importance. All three of those, I would say. Significant animal habitat for biodiversity. Well, threatened species, dozens and dozens of mammals and insects and birds, absolutely enormous diversity, again, well documented. So there's 3 of 10, and we only needed 1. So what's going to happen in 2050? I put 2050 in quite simply because by 2050, all the projections are that the majority of Malaysia's population will be living in cities. The Klang Valley will be absolutely jam-packed with high-rise buildings, and these will provide every possible thing that a human being needs to live, except peace and quiet and something beautiful to look at. And that is why I would argue that people will be desperate to move out of the cities for a short time to somewhere like Fraser's Hill, probably willing to pay a great deal of money for the privilege of having a day on the hill, probably having to queue up for years, perhaps to do a course beforehand. This is why we have to preserve it. Of course, you can have it all in a virtual form, but that isn't the same as walking around and actually getting soaked to the skin. Right. Well, a century of change. We've gone from the tin mine, which is now, of course, the golf course, to the police station, the post office, the Shahzan Inn, the clock tower. Again, more detail on the right-hand pictures from Zubaida. I would say that the conversion of the tin mine into a golf course is precisely the kind of decisive action that can be taken to, in some way, return the hill to a natural state. Of course, it hasn't re-established the original ecosystem. You can't. There's the Bauhaus. The reason I put the Bauhaus in is because the Bauhaus is actually a style of architecture which is quite different from what you see on the hill, but is exactly what you see all over the world today. That Bauhaus style, with its clean lines, its right angles, utilitarian, functional, that's what most of our buildings are. The Fraser's Hill buildings are the opposite of that, and again, detail from Zubaida about that. This is, I put in simply because where buildings have been created since independence, many of them actually either mimic the style of the mock Tudor, which we'll come to in a moment. There is the Majlis and the Development Corporation building. There's the Shahzan. Now, the Shahzan isn't that, though it has got a little bit of kind of black and white. But both the Shahzan and Silver Park and the Pines Resort all remind me very strongly of the resorts that you find in the Alps. And it is, after all, an alpine scenery. The only difference is we don't get any skiing. There's Silver Park, again, congruent with the Tudor style, but different, not clashing, but fitting in, because it's alpine. Right, and then on we go to you, and you're going to talk about the administrative buildings and so on, the types of buildings.
Yes, I'm on to the built environment on the hill and the heritage buildings. Speaking of buildings on the hill, there are 7 or 8 types of buildings in Fraser's Hill, and this is the number 1 is the government administrative building. So this was referring to what Roger said just now about the police station built in 1919 and the post office and so on. And then there is the residential, which includes the colonial bungalows, colonial buildings. Hang on, I'm being adjusted. All right. So, and there are schools on the buildings, religious building like the mosque and the temples, commercial buildings referring to shops and hotels and vegetable farms, and recreational would be referring to Allen's Water, the paddock, the golf course, and nature are the jungle trails, which are, I would say, included as a built environment, and the lake and waterfall. Some are built. In fact, the Allen's Water started as reservoir for water supply on the hill. So mainly what I'm going to show pictures of bungalows based on this book, and actually there are more details in this book that I can cover right now. The book is available from the Pahang State Library. So this is an overall, the way it looks on the hill. All these, the deep green are nature areas, and these are the recreational areas. Government buildings are more in the center. The lakes and waterfalls, commercial area here, residential, educational. There Chinese school, which is closed down right now, Tamil school fighting to survive, and then there's national school. So the architectural style buildings on Fraser's Hill, the British colonial buildings in Fraser's Hill owe their character to the British late medieval Tudor style of architecture that developed in England between 1485 and 1558. It was a transitional style mixing elements of Renaissance architecture and the Gothic style, found mostly in England, called the perpendicular Gothic because it emphasized the vertical lines. And this type of architecture can be found in all parts of the British Isles, including Ireland. And this is an example of mock Tudor beaten house. This picture here is Roger's uncles and aunts' house in Whitley Bay,
Northumberland.
Northumberland. So from the 1980s to 1940s, architects in the English-speaking world built houses in a style that came to be called Tudor Revival, which is based on the earlier Tudor architecture, revived by the arts and crafts movement in the mid-19th century. So the style gained popularity in the suburban neighborhoods in the UK, the North America, Australasia, and typified by the house here. The heritage buildings on Fraser's Hill are mainly single or double-story bungalows built in this style and adapted to local conditions for colonial administrators to escape the heat during summer months in tropical parts of the empire. And nearer home, this is the Royal Selangor Club, depicting Tudor beaten style. I would like to just give a few characteristics of heritage buildings on the hill. They are, first of all, they're purpose-built bungalows provided by the British government for its senior employees as resorts and retreats, such as this is the Jubilee in the old days, and now it's called Rompin House. And that's one type of bungalows for the purpose of holidays and resorts. The second purpose-built bungalows is funded by the Red Cross and Order of St. John of Jerusalem for ex-servicemen and women of the British Armed Forces, such as convalescents, such as this is the Red Cross bungalow, which is now the what they call boutique hotel called the Old Smokehouse. And there are also bungalows built by British private companies for their own senior employees, such as the Guthrie House. This is not the Guthrie House. These are all small bungalows, the small family. Sorry, that's the tavern. But they are big colonial mansions. And can I say mansions? So big, huge bungalows. Yeah. So these are the purpose of buildings, these bungalows. But the characteristics is that there are few, which I gathered from research from USM and UKM. Yeah? They depict masonry stone walls, masonry chimneys, they all have chimneys, masonry fireplaces, and symmetrical facade, small window panes, like that. They've got timber flooring, veranda on at least one side of the building. And this is an exception. This is the Art Deco style of the 1930s. This is Buona Vista on the hill. Yes, and also known as the Bauhaus. And this must have created quite a stir those days because it's very different from the rest. And this is one of those bungalows I mentioned. They're huge bungalows with probably 9 huge bedrooms. This is the Whittington bungalow, and now it's known as Guthrie, Sime Darby or Guthrie House. Yeah. And the the other characteristic is that they have deep overhang with structural support to create shaded area. This is show you an example. This is another one of those huge colonial buildings. Another one is called Convalescence. This is where also ex-servicemen were treated there. Sorry. These are activities on the hill. Yes, these are what was meant earlier. Overhang structural to create shaded zone. They have high ceiling. They have interlocking. These are all modern tiles already, but the old ones are interlocking roof tiles, referred to as the Marseille tiles. And most of these colonial buildings connected to, though it doesn't show here though, but my book has all these details. They have connection to servant quarters via a roofed corridor. And they've got timber, quite huge timber staircases, timber joists and exposed beams. So that's a little bit about the colonial bungalows. And these are the modern built buildings. This is the Bird Center in Fraser's Hill. And also, we mustn't forget that the built environment on the jungle trail, there are 8 jungle trails of ranging from 200 meters to 6 kilometers long. And I won't go into that. And well, this is just to give you an idea. This picture was taken in 1950s. The post office is still standing. The tavern here is still standing.
See the point.
Oh, okay. Sorry. The one in the foreground is the post office, still there. The one in the background is the tavern, now known as the Scots. I think it serves beer.
Oh, yeah.
Still. The one in the middle is called Maxwell Arms. It's a pub, a well-known pub those days, but it's demolished. And the one also on the top corner on the left has been demolished to make way for the Puncak Inn. And behind the tree, this is leading to the golf course, and these are the buildings those days. So how do we conserve and preserve? Like Roger mentioned just now, this is a good example. The mining area on the left has been turned into a golf course on the right. So yes, from now on, I will get Roger to...
You ordered to read that.
Okay, so so talking about heritage and heritage conservation, what is heritage is that all that has been passed to us by previous generations is all around us. It's in the houses we live in, our places of work, our transport, our places of worship, our parks and gardens, and our field villages, and so on. So heritage is also found in our movable possessions, our national treasures, and so on. And while everything we inherit is strictly our heritage, the term has become synonymous with places, objects, knowledge, and skills that we inherit that are valued for reasons beyond their mere utility. And our heritage assets are our responsibility. It is this responsibility that justifies a protection system for the historic environment and the consequent interference with the private rights of property owners. So how can we ensure the protection of Fraser's Hill? We must, number one, we must specify a clear and attainable set of objectives, and then identify inherent and external constraints that are likely to make the attainment of the objectives easier or more difficult. We have more to say in the next few slides. Who can ensure the protection? It's, in my view, is the stakeholders on the hill. They are internal and external stakeholders. The internal is people like us, Roger and I, people who stay or use the facilities, the workers, those who contribute economically to the hill, those who invest in Fraser's Hill development, the government, private sectors, those who receive benefits on Fraser's Hill, the researchers, the universities, and so on, and those who contribute in non-economic sense, the NGOs, the Nature Society, the PAW, Warisan.
Whatever it is.
Yes, these are internal stakeholders. We have a role to play. And the external, the short-term tourists, the Pahang Development State Agencies, the Forestry Department, owners of vacation homes, we all have a role to play here. And we need to have an adequate knowledge, adequate understanding in order to contribute. And these stakeholders can be divided into four in our view. Those who have low interest and low influence. Like, if I'm not wrong, the residents on the hill, they must be kept informed. High interest stakeholders who are of high interest, people like us, they need to be involved and consulted. Then low interest but high influence. These are powerful stakeholders. We need to engage them. And give me one example of low interest, high influence stakeholders.
Well, lots of the companies.
Yeah, lots of companies on the hill, like even Bank Negara Malaysia, even the Kereta Api Tanah Melayu. There are lots of companies who own bungalows on the hill. They seem to be uninterested and absent. And then high interest, high influence stakeholders. These are our partners, and we need to collaborate with them. So from here onward, I would like Roger to continue. Okay. Conservation versus development.
Right. Okay, so what would be appropriate in terms of development for the hill? Not in detail. I mean, again, let me say that there have been so many case studies and proposals and so on, dozens of them. I'm not exaggerating. But fundamentally, nothing that damages the ecosystem in its broadest sense or is insensitive to the style of the built environment, the mock Tudor, or a style that's congruent with it. So low rise, a maximum of 6 stories. That maximum of 6 stories is something that was agreed by the Pahang government in 1995, that nothing above 6 stories would be built on the hill from then on. Well, you'll see what happened. Okay, strengths and weaknesses. I honestly don't think we need to go through that, because I think we've probably talked about it, at least in principle, right. But I do want to come to destroyed heritage buildings, because if we're talking about preserving things, protecting things, we should just see what happens. Of course, natural destruction happens. Here is a landslide, 1998, which cut the Rasa house in half. And that was a beautiful bungalow, and one which Zubaida used to stay in with friends way back before it was cut in half. That was a landslide, swept it away. It's now just derelict, as you can see. That was natural, a natural disaster. But here is 2020. Here is the Maybank Lodge, one of two heritage buildings destroyed by, I put developers in quotation marks. I don't think they are developers. I think these people are a disaster, frankly, but I mustn't get into that. Okay. Landslides. I said that the hill was inherently unstable. Look at that. This is January the 3rd this year. 139 landslides recorded in one day by the police, right? This isn't any little group that's going around saying, oh dear, nasty things happening. This is the police. 13 people trapped on the Raud Fraser's Hill Road. Nobody injured, thank goodness. Nobody killed, but a lot of people stuck. And here is a building on the same day, demolished at the Gap. This is only inconvenient for people who are desperate to find a public toilet, but that's another story. All right, I want to get on to heritage buildings because we have a situation on the hill where buildings have been demolished and then either replaced or there are plans for replacement. And I wanted to just raise the point of heritage buildings, listed buildings in the UK. So what we would say is that listing celebrates, marks the special architectural and historical interest of the building. It also brings it under consideration of the planning system so that it can be protected for future generations. And the older a building is, the fewer the surviving examples of it, and the more likely it is to be listed. I mean, we don't say, right, any building built before 1900 is listed, because that would actually be millions of houses in the UK, and most of which are not particularly attractive, I fear. All right, what have we got? We got grade 1 listed buildings. These are of exceptional interest. Only about 2.5 of the total are graded buildings. What kind of implication does this have? The implication is that if you owned a grade 1 building, you could do nothing at all to it, either to its interior or exterior, other than make sure that it has proper maintenance. If you need to replace the roof, for example, it must be from the same material, and it must be done in the way it was done originally, by hand and without a lot of machinery and so forth. There are very few of these. Grade 2 asterisk buildings are particularly important, of more special interest, 5.8, but the vast majority of grade 2 buildings, 91.7, are in the second class. And this is the kind of building, if you buy a grade 2 building, that this is the kind you would get. The control is very simple on the face of it. You can do whatever you like to the inside, as long as you do nothing to the outside other than maintain it. We nearly bought a house of this kind in Lancaster, on the quay by the river, until we discovered that the river tended to come in to the cellar rather often, and that put us off. So on we go. If you look at replacing buildings in a national park, like the Lake District, the controls are quite enormous. You can replace a building, but you must use local materials. You must follow a series of recommended plans. You must do work on checking that it doesn't befoul the groundwater. You have to do a bat survey. You have to do a bird survey, and so it goes on. So you can replace buildings, but you must replace them with enormous attention to the effect on the environment and to the aesthetics of it. Right. We said numerous studies, research reports, investigations. That's just a quick list of them. Now, what about the future? Well, the future is, I think we have to say, the Malaysian economy. I think the second input to the Malaysian economy is, in fact, tourism, particularly ecotourism. But I would make the point that ecotourism is, in fact, an income-generating activity for many countries, ecotourism and/or historical and cultural. But the crucial point, I think, our crucial selling point, is that few can offer a combination of both in the same place. You don't go to London to admire the pigeons, but we've got in the hill an incredible example, a blend of natural and built environment. That is certainly rare and in many respects, I think, unique. And both are really extremely fragile. But that, I think, is our selling point, the combination of the two environments. Right. I've got some messages now from some concerned high interest, low influence stakeholders. You will meet this chap. We know him very well. Every time when we drive down from the hill, he is standing by the side of the road looking very, very sad. He's not intrusive. He's actually very polite. And he actually has left us some messages. He says, please remember that this is our home and not your rubbish dump. He's got a bit of rubbish in his hand. And he says, and remember too that a trapdoor spider isn't a pet. There are people who steal trapdoor spiders and sell them as pets. But the trapdoor spider was there before the dinosaurs, and there were dinosaurs in the Titiwangsa range. There are dinosaur remains up in the Thailand part, and since the whole range was linked, any animal could go, as I said, up and down. So the trapdoor spider saw the dinosaurs come and saw them go. Presumably, when they went, the spider said, well, I told you they were too big and lumbering to actually survive up here. But there you are. People are stealing the trapdoor spiders. Please don't give us your food. We all know how to find our own. And we don't want to get like you anyway. Right? And we don't want to end up like the dodo, extinct. And then a little thing about real estate. Kathy Fetker says, it is like, real estate is like Jack and the Beanstalk's a goose that lays golden eggs. Something that pays you month after month, whether you are working or not. Right, so here we are. Just like real estate, all Fraser's Hill needs is careful maintenance. Without that, it will disappear. So, do you want to see the references? Yes. I'm not going to read through these. Here are some references to some of the sources from which we got information, but honestly, there are dozens and dozens.
Yeah, dozens and dozens.
So that's it. That's it.
Thank you very much, Dr. Zubaida and Professor Bell, for that very interesting talk about the arguments for creating Fraser's Hill as a test case for heritage conservation. Yeah, I think you've highlighted quite a few of the areas which are of interest to Badan Warisan as well, concerning the historical and natural environment in Fraser's Hill, and very interesting for me to see some of your photographs of the bungalows in Fraser's Hill, because I have stayed at quite a few and also visited many of them since my childhood. We used to spend a lot of holidays there when I was very young. I think we don't have much time left, so I think we'll head straight to the question and answer session. We've got quite a few questions from the attendees this afternoon. If you just give me a second, I'll bring those up. Let's start with one question from Andy, which is why the Tudor style was popular in particular. Is it just fashion or?
Right. I think I have an answer to that. The British, or more correctly, the English, have an extraordinary propensity for believing that their history was quite different from what it was. And what you have, the philosophy behind this Tudor revival, is 19th century romanticism and the idea of the noble savage and the idea of the Morris dancing peasants and heaven knows what else, nostalgia for merry England when we ruled the waves and all the rest of it. And English people in particular dream of retiring to the country and living in a little cottage. This is their dream. If you're a retired footballer, you dream of running a pub in the country until you discover that you are the last person to go to bed every night and the first person to get up in the morning to clear up the mess. It is not a good idea. So this is it. It goes back to romanticism, which of course is becoming very popular today since our latest piece of curious political behavior. And yes, that I think is it. The idea that things were wonderful in the past.
You both. How long have you both lived in Fraser's Hill?
10 years. 10 years or so. Yeah.
Right. There's a question. How optimistic are you about the protection for Fraser's Hill in the future?
Well, we are both retired teachers, so we are silly romantics, and we believe in the Whig view of history that everything, as the Beatles said, everything's getting better all the time. There isn't a lot of evidence for that, but that we probably still believe in it. I think, I mean, the slide I showed you of what will happen in 2050 when people are living in high-rise buildings and so forth, that I think is hopefully will drive ideas of trying to preserve what there is. It's very resilient, but it needs help. And if I can use a very simple analogy and ask a question, if you say, what is a tree? Well, somebody will say, well, a tree is actually the raw materials for making furniture and for building buildings and so forth, or it's an inconvenience because it stops us from clearing land for agriculture or for development of other kinds. That's one view. The other would be a tree is the most incredible thing ever invented because it cleans the air of carbon dioxide and it pumps out oxygen. It uses the carbon dioxide to produce cellulose, which allows it to build itself. It provides a habitat for birds, insects, mammals. It catches rainwater, which drips down into the earth and carries nutrients into the soil. The tree is the most staggering thing. Now, these are two totally different attitudes. If you adopt the first, then you see the tree as a commodity, and you see Fraser Hill as a commodity to be sold to the highest bidder for short-term gain. You are plundering what there is. Alternatively, you can say we have a God-given right, a God-given responsibility to look after the heritage, to pass on to future generations. And if we can't pass on something to them which we've used up, we have to find something of equal value. Heaven knows what that would be. So I don't know. One side or the other is going to win.
Our next question is there a plan to set an upper limit to the carrying capacity in terms of maximum number of allowable overnight guests, daytime visitors, and foreign cars and buses to guide the future development of Fraser's Hill? This is from Chi Singh.
Right. I take issue with the word plan and say that there are proposals. And the major proposal, which is beautifully worked and presented, goes right back to 1995. And it is the World Wildlife or Malaysia study that was done. And that deals precisely with the term that you just used, the carrying capacity. No, there is no plan. There are proposals. Right?
Yes. And following on from that, what do the speakers think about the new development? A new development there. Should we be prescriptive and require new development to be of a similar style and materials to the existing buildings? It's a question from Andy. Thank you, Andy.
You better say something about stakeholders.
Yes, the new development, 15-story high on higher ground, higher than the island's water. I personally will say that there are already regulations on construction of new buildings. And if I'm not mistaken, I haven't got the actual regulations right now. It must not be more than 6 stories. Where we live, the Silver Park, it's definitely not.
It's 6 stories.
Higher than 6 stories.
This was the last one.
Yeah, and as to the style, as Roger pointed out earlier, the style should be, congruent with what we already have on the hill, and definitely there's some, in my mind, in our mind, there must be some kind of loophole that enables construction companies to start on something like that, because something like we are not constructing new buildings, we are constructing on a site and after demolishing a building. So there must be some loophole in the law for people to to be able to allow to build 15 instead of.
Yeah, but the thing is that because it was demolishing an existing building, apparently there was no need to do an impact assessment on the site, because it was privately owned and it was an existing building. Now, if I come back to talking about the Lake District, that's precisely the kind of thing you couldn't do, that you would have to do impact assessments and all the rest of it. It will happen that if you do pile driving and so forth, you will get more landslides. I mean, that will happen. You just saw 139 landslides.
That's quite an extraordinary number, I must say, for one day.
Yeah.
I was quite shocked when I.
But you imagine the pile driving. Imagine the heavy vehicles. If you've driven up and down, imagine a heavy vehicle loaded with building materials. The roads can't take it. It would be, frankly, an ecological disaster.
Do you? This is my own question. I know there was a system of driving up to Fraser's Hill before, when it was one up every hour. There was one half an hour up and half an hour down. Do you think, since they've changed that has affected the development in Fraser's Hill, and perhaps that old system would have been, should have been preserved in some way, just to avoid the sort of development that
if I had owned the rest house at the Gap, I would have said yes, because of course now you don't miss the gate and say, oh well, we've got an hour to wait, and let's go and have something to eat or a cup of tea or whatever in the rest house, or in the little green Chinese tea house opposite. So it has had the effect, I think, of destroying the rest house, which is tragic, because that was, again, internationally known. But I don't think it's affected the hill itself, actually.
I think my family spent, I think, the holidays up there just before it closed. The hotel closed. At the Gap. There's quite a few questions. I don't know whether we were able to get through them all. Why are several bungalows currently empty and dilapidated? That's a question from Stephen.
Well, I think two reasons. One, they belong to private owners, and question of not making enough money, and not being able to do maintenance, and the other one is through probably some legal problems that bungalows have been leased on long term to private companies, and then private companies go bankrupt or are not able to operate, and so on and so forth. And this happened to at least five of the bungalows on the hill, and it's such a shame. It was so beautiful, beautiful bungalows that just run down and swallowed by the jungle, and the authorities can't do anything about it.
Yeah, that's a real shame. In fact, what I've heard from internationally, in some other countries, that people are really interested in renting bungalows or villas private villas for holidays now since the pandemic, because you're isolated from other. You can be socially distant. You can create your own bubble when you're on holiday, and apparently the way forward, in a way, with in the future, maybe with holidaymakers, is actually renting private bungalows or even Airbnb. Seems to be much more popular than hotels, staying in hotels. So are there any bungalows which are still available for weekend rentals? I know that I looked myself, and that's question for Patrick, and it was quite difficult to find the actual link to find where how to rent the bungalows.
There are definitely bungalows for rent. One bungalows belonging to Pahang, Tourism Pahang, and I would recommend the Rompin bungalow, which is beautiful, and Stephen's Place, especially for nature, for
Buona Vista.
The Buona Vista, and what's the other one called?
Well, his new one as well at the Telecom.
There are definitely bungalows for rent, and
wild camping.
And camping as well. But this is the problem that I feel that people are not aware of, that they are not promoting enough of what's available, and not. I find that people are always asking how do we get the contact for this and that. How can it be that private owners are not promoting and advertising what they have up there? There's just lack of enthusiasm about their properties on the hill. This is the problem with private owners.
Can I say something about marketing? Can I just quickly say something which relates to that about marketing? If you think of the 4 P's of marketing, one of which is place. Okay, we know where the place is. The Second one is price. There is no price because, in fact, you can go in and out of what should be a state park or a national park for free, which is staggering, completely free. And often people have no respect for something they haven't paid for. The other thing is product. There is no clarity that I can see about what the product is. What is Fraser's Hill? I mean, that we don't know. Nobody's ever said. And the business too of promotion, which is what Zubaida is saying. The promotion is pathetic, to keep the P's. So, you know, this has to be tackled. Those 4 P's are really marketing 101. But we're back to the stakeholders. Somebody, we can talk our heads off, but we have no influence and we have no power to make decisions.
So just carrying on from there, I guess, how are the existing heritage buildings in Fraser's Hill currently being protected? Is there any protection? For example, can an existing owner modify, demolish as they wish? That's a can an existing owner modify and demolish as they wish?
Well, it looks like it.
So there isn't an act of parliament or any bylaws that exist to protect any of the existing buildings.
No, I don't think so. But I mean, you need to speak to a lawyer about that. It is supposed to be protected forest, but I don't know what that means.
So the forest is possibly has been gazetted, but not the architectural buildings.
No, the Fraser's Hill hasn't been gazetted at all.
So I mean, you said it's a protected forest. What do you mean by that?
Certainly the Selangor side is. And that's the other problem, that the responsibility for the hill is split not only between 2 states, Selangor and Pahang, but between 2 authorities within Pahang.
Right.
You know, then you've got 4 lots of people all pulling in totally different directions.
And there's a question from Rizwan who says, do any of the government authorities ever show any interest in conserving or preserving Fraser's Hill?
As they say in the army, no names, no pack drill, but a very influential person, a very highly placed person in tourism, I'm being very careful, came to the hill and was driven around very recently and was offered a presentation by the Development Corporation, Pahang Tourism, didn't go to that, didn't get out of the car and went back to where he or she had come from. I'm being very careful. So I think that's the answer to your question. No, they have no interest.
There's a question here, which is interesting, from Siti Farah, who comments about it being a very interesting topic. She is interested to know, do you think the British Royal Air Force campus, the Chinese and Indian schools, should be part of the Fraser's Hill heritage as well?
Of course. Of course.
It all should be. It's all part of them.
And it's in Selangor, you see. So talk to Selangor tourism about that. And
a question here from Dini. Is there a research group or committee that are working on the effort for conservation of the hill's built environment? I would like to dig more on the architectural heritage. That's a question from Dini. Thank you, Dini.
Well, there are lots and lots of people doing lots and lots of things and have been and still are. There has been some work done on the architectural, the built environment, some by University of Malaya, some by UKM, but a major study by UITM, which was finished a year or 2 ago, which is excellent, absolutely excellent. That's the major one, I would say. UITM at Shah Alam, the Built Environment Department.
Are these the whole webinar will be available on our website, on the Badan Warisan website after today. And are the links to those studies in the presentation you just gave?
I don't know. Are there? You're the link person. Did you put that in?
Not yet.
Not
No.
yet, but so is it available? Are those studies available to the public?
I would assume that if you approach the university and say, you know, as a bona fide person interested in this, you know, can I have a copy? I would assume they'd certainly look at the proposal. I can't speak for them. It's not my university.
Yes, I think it's something I think Badan Warisan might be able to help in that sense. We should have some of these papers and studies in our resource center.
Can I add to that a little bit? Of the UITM, it's a graduate school. It's done by students at graduate school, and it is actually an academic exercise. But the work is very thorough, you know, excellent, I would say. And the authorities should look at it. And will not, you know, just like other universities, whatever you do is just put away in a library or, you know, on the shelves. But these people must be consulted. UITM, UKM, UPM, UM, and so on. Yeah.
The different faculties.
Yeah. Everyone should, you know, garner effort and do something about Fraser's Hill.
Yeah.
Okay, just a couple of more. I think we might have time. We're going to end at about 1:15. There's a question about the gap. What's happening to the Gap House?
Oh dear.
From Anna Saupakiam.
Yeah, I'm very, very sad about the Gap Rest House. Nobody seems to be interested at all to do anything about it. I mean, you know.
I think it's got to the point where, because there is in fact weathering on the inside walls, I think that is the death knell for any building. That in fact it's more expensive to restore it than to demolish it and build something else. But I have always wondered why Selangor tourism, because it's down to Selangor, it's in Selangor, it's not in Pahang. I don't understand why they built a suspension bridge across the valley in front of it. The argument is that you can walk on the suspension bridge and look at birds. Well, you could actually have stood on the veranda of the rest house and look at birds. I don't understand why the money was put into that.
Yeah.
The whole of that area at the Gap is wonderful potential for development, it seems to me. If you're going to build a top-class hotel, then it could be done down there. But how do you get two states to agree on something like that? The boundary is there between the two states. And the other thing, I mean, let me put it like this. You don't go somewhere to stay in a hotel. You go for other reasons. I mean, we are going to have a holiday soon, we hope, in Penang, and we are going particularly to stay in the E&O Hotel. But we've both been to Penang lots of times. Zubaida is a graduate of the university. We're not just going to stay in the hotel. I've never heard of anybody going somewhere just to stay in a hotel. They go for other activities. So
Yeah.
I don't
sort of. I guess there are some hotels which are resorts which have all the facilities there, which people just go and stay at the hotels. But really, Fraser's Hill itself is a resort. The whole the whole hill itself has all kinds of attractions. So just a last question before we end. How many permanent residents are there in Fraser's Hill? That's a question from Patrick.
How many? What
residents? We know there are 2 permanent residents. Are there? How many are there?
I'm not sure about permanent residents, but any any time there's less than 1,000, about 900 plus, and they are not permanent residents. If they are born there, they moved away, and a few may have come back, but most people out there, people from other states who conduct business, restaurants and work in the hospitality centers, not permanent resident. It is not. It's not a village in the normal sense. It's quite what transitory.
I think one measure, an easy measure, is to say what is the school population. That gives you a hint, I think. And if you add the two schools that have survived together, we're only talking about 50 kids, I think, and only at primary level. There's no secondary school. And those figures, I think, are not going up or down. I mean, they're pretty well fixed, I think. I remember somebody coming into the library one day and he said to me, "Oh, well, you just said that you got the library in Fraser's Hill, for the local children," which we did. And he said, he was very sniffy. He said, "How many local children are there in here today?" And I looked around and I said, "Oh, there's 5. Five." I said, "Look again, a number has no meaning until you put it in context. Look at those children again. You are looking at 10% of the school population. If I was a library in the city and I could get 10% of the school population into my library, I'd be thrilled to bits. But I think, 1,000 absolute maximum permanent people. But the old people who were mainly Indians, I mean, they're all dying off, the people who were born there. There's one or two who've come back. But basically, the old timers, they are now very old and retired or dead.
Right. I think there are a few more questions, but I think we said we would end at 3:15. It's just past 3:15.
Well, we would be willing to go
on. I think perhaps. Well, let's have a look. Fraser's Hill are controlled by 2 states, Pahang, Selangor. Yeah. What critical action can both states complement to enhance and promote tourism and to conserve heritage buildings? That's from Dr. Abu Bakar.
I think I'm just going to say, don't ask me that, because there are dozens of proposals which the 2 states could look at. Full stop. Frankly, if you want something simple and cheap, plant some more flowers. Plant some flowering trees like they've done in Malacca, and in fact, as you're coming into KL. Flowers are great. There are birds that love them, bees love them, and all the rest of it. Trees, that's cheap. But I don't want to second guess proposals that people who are really qualified to work on this have been putting together and actually proposing for decades. I'm not competent to do that.
Well, I think we'll end there, and if there are any questions, particularly to directed to both of you, we'll send them off and hopefully get a reply to the people to the attendees. Thank you very much for your very enlightening talk this afternoon. I hope Badan Warisan can help in whatever way to advance your plans for heritage conservation at Fraser's Hill. I know my own self and a few other members of the Badan are very committed to seeing some kind of action taken to create a conservation area there, because I do think it is a very, very unique place, not only in Malaysia but internationally. So thank you very much. Good afternoon to you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us. Thank you.
Take care.
You too.
Okay. Thank you to all the attendees. Just to let you know from Badan Warisan, we're having a special student membership offer. That's only 20 ringgit for 1 year subscription to Badan Warisan. We're waiving the 50 ringgit entrance fee, and that's only available until the 30th of April 2021. So you'll be getting some information on that. You can click on your chat box for more information on that. Here there's a slide which tells you, for more information, you can also look at one of our social media sites or our website. You can also download a form to be a member there. Badan Warisan is a registered charity, and so we are dependent on the donations of corporations and individuals. So if you would like to donate to Badan Warisan, the details are there, and also in the information that you'll be getting on the chat box. So thank you very much to the attendees this afternoon. I hope you enjoyed the webinar, and we will be, if you check out social media, we will be having more of these talks. I hope you enjoyed this one, and so I'll leave you there. Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Have a nice day. Take care.